Call of Duty Black Ops, we wanted to take players to an entirely new place and give them entirely new gameplay experiences, something they hadn't done yet with Call of Duty. And the era was perfect for that. And as we were doing our research and learning about these secret wars and these deniable operations and all this covert warfare that was going on underneath the layer of what people were seeing. They thought there was, it's this Cold War and Vietnam War and all this, but meanwhile, there's these black operations that are going on between the two superpowers. And as we learned about those, we learned about the black operations and the kinds of soldiers and the elite forces that were conducting these operations. It just inspired all kinds of creativity and let us go and do things that Call of Duty hadn't done yet. Our game is not a game about the Vietnam War. It takes place during an era that also includes the Vietnam War. And of course, there were black operations that occurred, operations that people didn't know about during that era. And we'll be tackling that part of it, and it isn't the war itself. I would say that Call of Duty Black Ops takes the gloves off. Treyarch hasn't been afraid to do that in the past, and you should expect no different from Call of Duty Black Ops. We wanted to actually work with some people who conducted these black operations. So we worked with Major John Plaster, who is one of the most published authors. But he himself was SOG, was a Studies and Observations Group. That's what they were called, kind of an innocuous title for this group, and had extensive experiences in Southeast Asia and during the Vietnam War. Conducting these black operations, and so he came to our studio and shared his experiences with us, everything from his training to the tactics and strategies that they'd used to some intimate experiences that they had, and it definitely stimulated the thought of our designers and our creatives in the studio to come up with some of the gameplay that we did. We also talked to the other side. We talked to Russian Soviet Spetsnaz during that era, and this is not the Russia of today. It is the Soviet Union, the formidable power that it was. So, and he was an inspiring individual, to say the least, as he talked about his training and what they would do. One of the things, as I mentioned, with Call of Duty Black Ops that we wanted to do was come up with all kinds of new, fresh gameplay. The idea to use alternative forms of ammo actually came from talking with some of these veterans, and they actually talked about packing their own ammo for the purposes that they wanted or that they needed. The bow and arrow or the crossbow was actually inspired by a couple of things. One is we were doing some research, and we learned that some of the indigenous people that worked in Vietnam, that worked with some of the special forces there, did actually use bow and arrow during their missions. It's a great stealth weapon, and if you're effective with it, obviously incredibly lethal, and you can go undetected. So we learned about that, and then we also heard from Major John Plaster that there was a member of SOG who would always choose a bow and arrow as he was going out on his missions. Now, in the mission that we have it actually featured in, you're behind enemy lines inside the Soviet Union, and it just seemed like the perfect device to be able, as it was, it comes up during a stealth sequence. We don't want the player to get detected, and it seemed like the perfect way that you might want to modify your weaponry to place a really explosive incendiary device at range without being detected. And the other weapon is the Dragon's Breath shotgun shell. Well, as far as we're concerned, we're creating a Black Ops game, so we did research on all different types of alternate forms of ammo. So when we're looking at it, much like the, inspired by these Black Ops soldiers, we look at a mission and we're like, well, what should our loadout be? And whatever was in our arsenal was what we chose. And who's to say that they didn't? Everything they did was classified.